people think they're on a train ride, they think they're going to be going pretty fast. If you're ever lucky enough to travel over the Pacific, go to Japan and ride the Shinkansen, that thing does move pretty fast. And it's so smooth. You're going so fast and it's so smooth it almost kind of makes you nauseous. But this machine up front is not a Shinkansen engine. That is a 1912 Shay-type geared locomotive. It's an articulating engine. So if you look at, you can see past the tree a little bit, and around the corner we'll be able to see a little bit better. If you follow the motion, you can kind of tell exactly what's happening. So the engineer is releasing steam into the engine set, it's forcing the pistons. Our connecting rods are turning our crankshaft. The crankshaft is turning those circular things, that square shaft in between it. And then along each wheel on that side of the engine is a gear on the line shaft that is turning a gear on the wheel. Particular machine was the first one that came here to Roaring Camp. Before that, it worked in a place called Dixie, Virginia. It worked in different places in Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Back east, it pulled cars full of coal. And when our founder, Norman Clark, found this machine in Virginia, it was sitting in the weeds, right? Just like you see someone with a car in their yard or something like that. It's all grass growing up around it. It's exactly what it looked like. So what they did was him and another engineer, Gene O'Leg, they took a diesel engine and a flat car all the way across the country to Virginia. They got an air compressor and they hooked it up to this machine. Instead of running it on steam, they ran it on compressed air. They drove it right on the flat car and dragged it all the way out to California. And it has worked here since opening day, April 6, 1963, making it working here longer than anywhere else, or any of the other railroads where it worked. And this is one of 3 types of geared locomotives. Roaring Camp has one of each, making it a National Historic Engineering Landmark. Let's shift gears here to these beautiful and magnificent beings. One of the neighbors of the Redwoods, that is a California bay laurel, or Umbularia californica, which is also known as the headache tree. Now, it's called the headache tree because that long green slender leaf has a super rich concentration of menthol in it. If you sniff it, it can get rid of your headache. Or if you're like me and you have to clear a bunch of it, and you're around it all day, you get a splitting headache. So rather than, it'll give you one and it'll also take one away. If you look to your left here, you're going to see a large group of redwoods all clustered together. Now remember when I said the nursing trees are waiting to take over that spot in the canopy? That's exactly what happened right here. That parent tree fell down or was cut, we don't know. It happened 300 to 500 years ago probably, judging by the circumference of those trees. But all those nursing trees started growing up all at the same time. And they created what we call a fairy ring, or what I like to call it, a cathedral grove. Now when you walk down into one of those, it feels like you're in a house of worship, right? Like a giant, tall, high ceilings and windows. Very, very special place. Now I'm from the far, 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 far east, which is Ohio. And back there we call a fairy ring, it's a species of mushroom. And when they fruit, the mycelium fruits, it grows in a circle. And they call that a fairy ring. They also say you're not supposed to walk inside that fairy ring. You're not supposed to step inside it. It's very bad luck. And I did that once. And that's how I ended up here. Now, what we're rolling through here is old growth redwood forest. So this is, our founder Norman Clark built all of this to kind of show you what it would have been like to have worked or have been on a logging train. However, none of this was logged. This was all built here just for all of you. But this is only some of the 5% of old growth redwood forest which still exists. A little bit of a sad story. So, for 240 million years, a California coastal redwood has been on this planet. It's quite a long time. It's a lot of sunsets and sunrises. The Spanish coming from the Pacific Ocean after looking along the coast for places to settle and colonize themselves, they came across what they assumed to be an immense supply of wood, right? We're talking about 30,000 board feet per adult old growth redwood tree. It's a lot. So of course, you know, people get greedy and they start chopping them down. Now at the time what they didn't know was they were not sustainably harvesting the trees. So again, 95% of them were cut. But what they also didn't know is when you cut down an adult redwood tree, all those nursing trees can't differentiate between the tree having fallen over and the tree being cut. So we still have a lot of redwood forests. In fact, everything you're going to be able to see through this gap in the trees coming up over there, that's all 160 years old. All of those trees were clear cut. So when you came down that railroad, which was built because of all of the trees, right, to come and get them, that was all stumps all the way across there. And that is the result of those nursing trees having bounced back 160 years later. The environment of this old growth forest has such a rich and vast biodiversity that it actually rivals tropical rainforests with the amount of species that live here. Now this is a temperate rainforest, which means that a lot of the time during the course of the year it is dry. It is dry, in fact, about 8 months out of the year compared to the 7 to 8 months. And then 4 to 5 months it is just being inundated with rain. In a good year we'll get over 100 inches, which is a lot of moisture. And the adult redwoods need about 500 gallons of water a day. Now, why do they live somewhere that is dry 8 months out of the year if they need 500 gallons of water a day? And the reason for that is because they still get that moisture, but they get it instead of it in the form of rain, they get it in the form of fog. This is between Big Sur and 14 miles north into the coast of Oregon, going from south to north, is the Pacific Coastal Fog Belt. And every evening that fog rolls in, and these giants will absorb it not only through their leaves, but it will then condense on the leaves and drop to the base of the tree. And they will absorb it there as well. Now, the Spanish explorer Gaspar de Portola had a scribe with him by the name of Father Crespi. Father Crespi is the first one to have been credited with naming these trees. Not that he was extremely brilliant. All he called them was Palo Colorado, right? Redwood. Pretty straightforward. It's not a very elaborate name. But it begs the question, like, why are they red? There's a few different answers to that question. The red color comes from tannic acid, which is another adaptation that they've made in the course of their 240 million year evolution to make them resistant to fire, to insects, fungus, mold. As we go up, I think there's 2, and let me know if you spot them. I've only seen 2 in this forest, of poison oak or other vines trying to grow in the redwoods. They'll grow on all the other trees, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the tannic acid or not, these are just my own personal observations, but nothing likes to grow on them. Now, resistant to rot, a 2,000-year-old redwood tree will take about 2,000 years to decompose completely, which is bananas. Again, that tannic acid. Now, all around the redwoods, you've got the Umbellularia californica, this California bay laurel. It's growing everywhere, and its life cycle, when it starts growing, it almost always V's right at the base. When it V's like that, it creates a crotch that will fill with water, which makes it a very suitable place for fungus and other things to grow. So a lot of times, one of those major limbs of that bay laurel will fall off. And their life cycle is way shorter than the redwoods, right? So they fall down in the forest, and what happens to all of that menthol in those leaves? It goes into the ground, and it feeds the redwoods, giving them, again, more menthol, more tannic acid, and they feed them for thousands of years. Now, speaking to the biodiversity, the major multicellular creatures that we see, mountain lions, bobcats, coyotes, skunk, fox, possum, gray squirrels, ground. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you see that track going off to the right? That will be the track that we come down and circle back around to, which means that we will have to stop for a switch there. So when we do leave Bear Mountain and come back down there, we'll stop for a short moment before we continue down grade. Now, down below, when we were going over the trestle, and I pointed out that Cathedral Grove of Redwoods, that one is impressive, but the one that we're going to be parked by up here, I feel like takes the cake. In the center, you're going to see an old parent tree stump, and that's still very much alive. At the top of that thing is kind of like a cauterized wound. Because if you look at the base of the stump in the center, there are nursing trees growing out of it. Just like, you know, the brothers and sisters up around it. Now, something that I forgot to mention is that, you know, the nursing trees grow up, right? They're like the second generation. They produce their own nursing trees. The next generation comes along. But what I forgot to mention is that this is about the 5th generation that you're looking at here, which puts this root system to your left just under 10,000 years old. Not only that, but every single one of those trees is genetically identical to the one next to it. So that's all one tree, technically. If we were to dig all the way down under the roots to take a look at the whole thing, it's all one tree. Right. Different branches, more or less. Now, again, folks, this will be our stop here at Bear Mountain. We're all going to stay on board, but if you feel the need, you need to stand up and stretch your legs, feel free to do so. Just please stay on board.
Yeah. Hey, we got some bugs back over here as well behind us. Hanging out. Yeah. I didn't know about the root system. No? I didn't know that they were that's how they repopulated.
So we say highball running air. Highball is what I told him when we first left that spot we were sitting at. And he gave me 2 shorts, dit, which is the letter I. It means I hear ya, I'm going, or I see a good switch. When he just did the air test, I just said highball running air. It means we have air throughout the length of the train. He responded again with 2 shorts, the letter I. I hear ya, I'm going. Here we go. Wondering what it's like to get 80 to 100 tons of train behind you with your 42-ton locomotive in the front and get down a hill like we've just climbed. What you want to do is train your ears for what's happening. When you hear a hissing off the side of your car, it means the engineer is letting go of some of the air and letting the piston travel of our braking system extend, so to apply the brakes. As we go into a curve and you hear that machine up front start going, that is our automatic air braking, it's an air compressor, a pump. And every time he releases, he's putting air back into the train line up to 90 PSI. Right there. And he just released the brakes a little bit because we're going through a curve. And if you have the brakes set up as you're going through a curve, the flange on the wheel, which keeps us between the rails, will bind up and it'll slow us down to a stop. So he'll use the momentum coming into the curve and the flanges to slow us down. big part of railroading on this particular mountain because there's no school for this, right? This is the school for this. Because you have to know the mountain, you have to know the hill. So it can be very tricky. This particular gentleman's been doing this, I believe, for about 20 years. His name is Doug Deemer. He's our fireman, or our engineer. Our fireman today is a young fellow named Don Sage, who's been working here longer than I have, but he started in the restaurant for about 7 years, and I think he's been on at the engine house about 6 years. So I'm gonna make my way to the front of the train and throw that switch, and then we'll keep heading down the hill. Does anyone remember, like, maybe in the 90s there were commercials or advertisements for speed reading? You could learn, yeah, that was, I didn't make that up? Okay. I can never figure that out. I mean, I think I read faster out loud than I do just in my head. But I was just thinking about that commercial because the other thing I was doing as the train was rolling by and I was at the switch, it's kind of like speed reading where you're looking through all of the mechanisms underneath the train to see if you see anything abnormal. It's called a roll-by inspection. And even if you were to work for a railroad like Union Pacific or Norfolk Southern or CSX or something like that, if I was on my train that goes down to the beach and one of their trains came through, the federal guidelines mandate that I inspect their train, even if I don't work for them. And if I see something like what they call a hot box, which is those journal boxes, at the end of the axle rotating, if it grabs some of the wool waste that lubricates it, if it gets stuck in there in a certain place, it can actually catch on fire. They call it a hot box. And if you see anything like that, you have to notify that train by any means necessary. That's a federal guideline in the General Code of Operating Rules, governed by the Federal Railroad Administration. But this braking system that we're using wasn't invented until the 1880s, after a lot of trains had already been invented. Right? Beginning to invent them in 1700s, late 1700s. And it was come up with by an American Civil War veteran who fought for the Union, named George Westinghouse. Now Westinghouse became quite famous an American inventor and an entrepreneur, you actually still see the logo for Westinghouse on a lot of things. They make anything from washing machines to TVs or what have you. They've been around for a long time. But maybe one of the most important things that Westinghouse did, not necessarily in the invention of this braking system, but who he invested some of his money in. And that was a Serbian-born immigrant to the United States. He came here from Budapest, Hungary. Very famous American inventor, because he did most of his work here when he was got his citizenship. And that was Nikola Tesla, inventor of the alternating current motor. Him and Westinghouse went into business together, and Westinghouse and Tesla had many businesses. He usually would get an investment, and then he would use the money to do experiments more so than actual. Yeah, he did. He did die. He died with no money. But you know what's interesting about that is when the Westinghouse Tesla merger happened, and they were trying to sell these alternating current motors, they were met with a lot of opposition from the inventor of direct current motors. That was Thomas Edison. And I'll let you read about it because I don't want to talk about it in front of kids on the train, but there were some, Edison did some really bad things to smear the alternating current motor sales for Westinghouse and Tesla. And when Westinghouse went to Tesla and said, listen, I can't pay you any more royalties on these sales because we're losing so much money from the smear pit campaign, I hope you understand. Tesla took the contract he had with Westinghouse and he ripped it up. Now, I want you to think about how many people in your family have used alternating current power. How many generations, right? So he forewent probably trillions of dollars, and he died. All he wanted to do was give the world free power. But if we go to Wikipedia and we look up who invented or who holds the patent on radio communication, who do we hear? Who do we see? Marconi, right? His first name is Giuseppe Marconi. He is the one who holds the patent on radio. However, he had to use 17 of Tesla's existing patents to patent radio. Tesla did almost all the work. Actually just beat him to the patent office. Now, the other important thing to remember with all of these technologies from Marconi, from Tesla, from Westinghouse, and Edison, you know, trains were in the mix everywhere you went, right? And at that time, it was the only way to get across the country quickly. And after the American Civil War, Grant had the Transcontinental Railroad being built by the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific. But as technologies emerged, our technological advances kind of just skyrocketed, right? Tesla even predicted that you would have something that you could carry in your pocket that would let you see someone on the other side of the planet. You have one of those, don't you? I do. But before the advent of automobiles, and even afterwards, you know, this is a very historic train. All of this equipment that we have is very primitive. The only automatic thing is that pump you hear right there. The only automatic thing in this whole process. But being able to communicate with the radio to know if there's another train coming or something of that nature saves many lives. Because it was very dangerous to travel by rail before these other technologies evolved. But he was tracking one because it was harassing his camp and probably smelling all their food and all that stuff. And while he was tracking it, he came across a 4-foot boulder of quartz crystal. Now, if you're digging and you start finding quartz, it means you're close to finding what? Gold, that's right. Now, running through this piece of quartz was a ribbon of gold. It was worth about $1 million, and I think it was the 1870s. So he basically was a millionaire. I mean, because $1 million today is going to get you far, but $1 million back then would be, you know, an insane amount of money. And what does he do with it? He builds a grist mill down on the San Lorenzo River. He builds a still and he starts making whiskey. That's right. He builds a sawmill for the logs. He builds the grist mill. He starts distilling whiskey. This turns the whole valley into a hub of alcohol production. You can still, I would not go looking for them, but I've heard tell of places where you can still see the stills. Now this gave them, and this little group, they were down here in the sawmill, quite a reputation, actually. And Spanish authorities came through on their normal visits, and they described what they found here as a wild and roaring camp. And it's been called Roaring Camp ever since, long before Norman came here and built the narrow gauge, or rolling over. Now as we go through this curve here, as it turns left and you see that cut through the trees, on the other side of the valley you can see that big brown spot, right? It's a sand quarry now, but that's where Isaac Graham started trying to dig for gold, more gold, and started mining. Now he didn't have any heirs, so when he died he left his property to his lawyer. The lawyer didn't want it, so he sold it to the county, and the county put it up for sale. And a young couple from San Francisco came down the railroad, which used to connect, our beach train used to connect to San Francisco. And they came through the valley with all the trees cut down, and they came to this last oasis of old growth trees. And the husband of Elizabeth, Joseph Welch, decided that this was a gold mine. We could sit on it for 15 years, cut them all down. There won't be any old growth left, so these will be worth even more. We'll make a fortune. And his wife was like, hold on, Joe. We're not going to do that. And he was like, okay. Now, the study of trees, or dendrology, had come along far enough to know that at this point, when you can count the rings of a tree that's cut, right? Each ring is basically a chronological map of how old the tree is because of the growth ring, right? The growth ring was here, then it was here, then it was here. Each of those rings represent a year. So it had been brought to the attention of many people that, you know, these trees are ancient. They've been here. The one that's next door at Henry Cowell, you can go back, and it started growing before the birth of Christ, actually before Chinese invented paper. That's how far back how old that tree was. 2,000 years old or something. Over. But Elizabeth wanted to save these trees, and she wanted to save them for future generations to experience. And the same trees that she walked through, that she wanted to save, are still here. And here we all are, experiencing them, just as she had hoped. Now, in the Henry Cowell Forest, there's a loop trail. I encourage anyone and everyone to do it if you'd like, if you've never been in there. It'll take about a half an hour at a leisurely pace. You can get it through it pretty quick if you'd like. But that was actually the first instance of ecotourism on the planet. Because Joseph realized they can't make any money if we're not going to cut the trees down, so we got to do something. So they built a hotel, and private parties used to bring their camping car on the train, and they'd have their car cut off down there on the siding, and they would go down, fish and camp on the river, camp in the big trees. And when I say people used to do this, it was extremely wealthy people. The Vanderbilt family used to park their camping car on the siding down there. And it's also famous because Teddy Roosevelt came through here during his presidential campaign. And he was really mad because when he walked in, there were a bunch of business cards pinned to the tree, and he thought that was sacrilege. I mean, these are before even Elizabeth got here. There was the Awaswas natives lived here, and they lived amongst these trees. The same trees you're looking at. And that brings me to my final thing I'd like to talk to everybody about. And that is, this is a disclaimer, this is my opinion and not that of Roaring Camp Railroads. I just want to let everybody know that we all have a pretty big decision to make in November. Personally, I think it's pretty clear-cut, but maybe not for some of you. But I want to say, if you are worried about the Earth getting warmer, I've got good news for you. And that is, the easiest way to store an excess of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere safely is in wood. We are living in a time on our planet where there are more trees missing than there have ever been. So we need to plant more trees. And it also, again, because I have to be unbiased, because all I'm worried about is taking tickets really most of the time, pre-COVID. But please use your vote for the planet. It's very important. And at this point, it's not just for us, right? And it won't ever be for us. It'll be for the little kid you have on your lap. It'll be for their grandkids, 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 grandkid. Because if there's one thing I learned in the Boy Scouts, it's leave a place better than you found it. Or any situation that can be put in. So take that home with you, and please plant some trees. And if you don't live anywhere terribly cold, they actually have the giant sequoia saplings and the coastal redwood sapling that you can buy in the general store. Or you can just go to Orchard Supply or somewhere else and buy a young tree. Or you can plant them from seed. I gotta walk up all the way to the switch again, but the last thing I'll say about this, because sometimes I get on a tangent, which I apologize, but this is a little brain exercise I like to do, right, when I wake up every day. So I remember the fact that light particles, or photons, travel at 186,282 miles per second. That's miles per second, right? It's the speed of light. Those light particles bounce off of things when they come 93 million miles from the sun towards Earth. They bounce off of stuff, those photons explode, and those photons come back, and they bounce inside my eyeball. My brain flips it upside down, and I render it in real time in less than a femtosecond, which is a trillionth of a second. And that's life, and that's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And the whole reason that life exists on this planet is because of the photosynthesis of light. Plants. They create oxygen that we can breathe, and they make it a habitable place to live. They're the most important things on this planet. And just like the synthesis of light is the most important thing happening on our planet, that gentleman, your fireman, Don Sage, controlling the amount of water you have is the most important element to this whole experiment. So Thanks to him and our engineer, Doug Diener, your engine, our number one Shea engine there. Everyone here at Roaring Camp, including myself, George Shea, your conductor. I want to remind you that beautiful tree line to our left, those gigantic trees there, Henry Cowell, Redwood State Forest. If you have a chance to walk through there today, I recommend that you do. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Remember, your good words, your good thoughts, your good deeds, take care of each other. We're going to get through 2020, I promise. Support those that are doing the right thing right now. And we'll see you next time. Please remain seated until the engineer brings us to a complete stop. He'll give us one short whistle. That is the letter E. It's an emergency. It means that we're completely stopped. The brakes are set up. So these folks here on the right can disinfect this train. There we are. Welcome back, folks. See you next time. And again, thank you for coming.